And we are now recording. So Dennis Hysom, welcome. We're glad you're with us today.
Glad to be here.
Tell us about your work.
So I'm a Dennis Hysom. I'm a PCUSA pastor. Just some background, spent 4 years in a church in Nebraska, Austin Seminary graduate. And then from 97 to 2022, I was a chaplain in the Army active duty. Retired in June of 22. And then I took on the role as the endorser for 4 denominations: PCUSA, Cumberland American, Korean Preston Church Abroad. And so I am the link between the Veterans Affairs chaplaincy, the Federal Bureau of Prison chaplaincy, and the military chaplaincy, and those 4 denominations. Um, Represent about 150 chaplains from across all those denominations. I also do any of your pastors who are getting board certified. I'm also the person who does the letter for that. Trying to think what else. Great job. Got some great people doing some great work across the U.S. Interesting group. Some are active duty, some are reserve and have a church. Guard have a church. I've got one guy who's an airline pilot and is a National Guard chaplain. So it's quite a diverse community. Um, we take care of our people in all those areas. Veterans Affairs, Federal Bureau of Prison. If you have any questions on veterans issues, I've got some people that you can talk to.
What are the basic qualifications for the chaplains?
So across the board, at least with our denomination, obviously an MDiv. Growing trend right now is a lot of civilian hospitals aren't requiring ordination. And so I've got commissioned lay preachers and stuff that's creating a whole new dynamic for me. But bottom line is there's educational requirements. The Veterans Affairs requires 4 units of CPE. Federal Bureau of Prison has an age limit. You retire, I think it's 56, 57. And then obviously with the military, it's undergrad, some type of master's degree, because again, with our Muslim and some of our other faith groups, they don't have a seminary per se, so it's a master's degree of some way, shape, or form. There is an age limit with the military and obviously physical requirements. Now, right now, on the military side, the Guard and Reserve are taking people over the age of 50 because they're so short chaplains, but they're not guaranteed retirement because 62 is the mandatory retirement age, but they can still serve all those years and take care of their communities. The other side too is that it's also a validated position. So while I endorse, I've got a form that Presbyterian has to sign, and of course you all have to validate them to go into the Guard, Reserve, any of those other organizations. So it's kind of a dual process.
So the veterans are the only ones that require CPE?
Yes. It's
Wow.
encouraged for the other ones, but it's not required.
Wow.
What was nice about the Veterans Affairs was they had some residency programs where you could spend 2 years working in a VA hospital and get your 4 units and some specializations. And then there were budget cuts, and now the government shut down. So I've got people kind of in quandary as to where they're going next. So I encourage people, if you at least can get your 4 units of CPE and be board certified, it makes you a better candidate.
How many of you are there out there, Dennis?
I mean, from at least the people that I endorse is about 150 that are actively serving in the VA, the Federal Bureau of Prison, and the Guard Reserve. I've got about 25 packets right now. I'm working on some other people who want to, looking for some positions. We have I've got several hundred retirees that are on my list, and they still continue to serve in their respective capacities. But I'm not sure how many VA chaplains there are overall, but like on the Army active duty side, there's about 1,400. And you've got Guard Reserves. There's thousands of chaplains, at least in that narrow niche. Now, I don't handle things like civilian hospitals, civilian prisons, hospice. Some endorsers do all of that. So you all would validate for those positions, and I endorse for this position.
So what's the greatest need you see right now in your position? I expect you get exposed to an awful lot, but how would you articulate the greatest need, right?
For me or the chap, or would
Well,
can
let's
answer.
start with the people you're serving, and then we'll get to you. So,
Okay. Yeah. With us, it's when I graduated Austin in 92, I think my graduating class was about 35 just MDiv students. My wife's MDiv class a year later was about the same thing. And now I'm seeing classes that are way smaller than it has been. And I had one guy graduate from a seminary, and he was the only one of his graduating class going into a parish. The rest of them are going to nonprofits and things of that nature. So it's, I'm competing for the same thing you all are competing with, is trying to find pastors to go into pulpits and into churches to serve. And so right now it's kind of as we look at the way religion's changing, the way the denomination's changing, we're all kind of grappling with the same personnel issues. I'm also a part-time interim with a church here near me, and they're beginning to look at potential candidates. And so the first thing would be just people. And I think that is something that I'm not sure how to crack that code. Fortunately, in the Guard Reserves, we can take people second, third career, older. But it's still trying to find people who want to go to school and then go off and serve in the church or one of these other capacities.
but among the veterans that you're ministering to, what is their need?
I think again, I think you don't have to serve to take care of a veteran. It's really about listening to people, being there with them. It's nice to be able, if you've got some experience, but I think in any case, it's taking care of people. It's being able to listen, but also to understand their background and where they came from. Biggest thing right now that's happening, obviously, with the shutdown is the slashings of things in the VA. I don't have a good read right now on where things stand, but I've got some chaplains who are in the VA, and they're kind of wrestling with cutbacks on doctors, cutbacks on staff. Um, you know, that's a huge shift. Anyway, a lot of cases the VA is a lifeline in both not only the medical care but the mental health care, and the family. Families can't be there, but uh, taking care of the veteran holistically, and not just for the medical reasons, but also the mental health reasons. Many of them defer things on active duty, especially, or Guard Reserve, because everything's about the security clearance, and sometimes getting help, at least for a long time, was seen as a detractor to keeping things, which could put you out. And so trying to lessen those walls to bring them down and give them safe places to talk and to come to. I'd be amazed at how many veterans there are in average churches. How many, the one that my wife and I attend, about half of them are all veterans in some way, shape, or form. I live in Western Carolina, outside of Asheville. The other church that I'm interim at right now, I've got a lot of them that are Vietnam. I don't have World War II or Korean War vets, but recent veterans too. And there's a couple that were kind of like back row attenders when I came, because I had the prior service and I was a chaplain. They've opened up to me, and so trying to find resources for them is important. Doesn't have to be me. Being a chaplain doesn't have to open doors. It's that you're being willing to listen and to be open to them. Um, that's the biggest key.
I've had situations with veterans in my congregation, PTSD, all kinds of other issues, which were way out of my league. And as a generalist, I knew real fast to go find somebody that
Right.
can do that.
And I think that's networking with whatever resources are in your area. There's a lot there. I don't know about your state. My state, North Carolina, has a veteran service officer in every county, and their job is working with resources for veterans, everything. Like when I retired, um, my disability packet had to go up through a myriad of chains, and she was able to get my power of attorney and track where it went and give me some advice on some things. She also told me about some benefits that I was entitled to as a retiree, and also is a connector to resources in the broader sense. Now, fortunately, the VA is like 40 minutes from my house, but there's some places where you are far, far away from any type of resource. But there are organizations and communities that can still help with counseling. It doesn't have to be military or veterans organizations. It's hooking them with somebody, like you said, has a skill level above mine. I can counsel to a point, and then I'm like, and then I've got to hand you off. Not that I just leave with the person. I'll still be in relationship, but we got to find just somebody who can really help you dig into this and find some better answers. And this goes there any type of thing in our community, homelessness. You know, when I took over the interim position in this town nearby, I knew my town pretty well. I had to relearn where all the homeless food banks, counselors were. And once I discovered that, it opened up all kinds of doors to begin to route people to and try to get them some help.
Oh, 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 oh.
Any other questions or things I've not covered? Trying to find my notes here that.
Oh.
So just, you know, how I'm connected to domination. I basically represent the 3 stated clerks and the secretary general of the 4 denominations. Reason why it's me is that all those organizations, the VA, the Federal Prison, and the military, doesn't have time to have letters or documentation come from all the different subcategories of every denomination. So, you know, how many presbyteries do we have? How many synods? How many home churches? How many, you know, take all your different denominations. And so when something's set forward, I'm on a list up at the Armed Forces Chaplain Board with the VA, with the Civil Air Patrol, and the other organizations. That's, I mean, the person who can officially sign the form. However, for the military, there's a form you all as a presbytery have to sign. Yes, I would like to sign the form for you, but as I was telling Larry, it's a validated position, and you all have got to say, yes, you can be guard, reserve, part-time VA, or full-time VA, or full-time whatever. And then that, you know, based upon your internal structure, you put them where they are based upon being, you know, as we say, serving outside the walls of the church, yet still serving the church.
That would be a wonderful problem to have.
Yeah.
We have a very active veterans outreach center here in Utica,
Good.
and we really don't have much of a relationship with them.
Okay. I'd love to reach out to him for you, or we could work something to, you know, happy to come up sometime and meet him and, you know, try to coordinate. Or I could also see if I've got any retired chaplains in the area. One of my board members he's a former reserve engineer, but he lives up in the New York area. I think he's in one. He mentioned 2 presbyteries from New York that are combined or talking about combining. So I don't know if that's okay. So it's Dale Barber, and so I don't know if it is. He mentioned I guess he's at the point of a couple presbyteries, but he's also a good resource. And my board members tend to be. I got a couple chaplains. I got several who have never served, but they are fantastic resources, and a couple that are former other branches of the military.
That's a conversation we will have in the not too distant future.
Okay.
Could you tell me where he lives? Do you know?
I'll email it to you. I can't remember the town now. It's after this meeting, I'll pull up his address. And I'll send him an email. I'll hook you guys up via email.
Yeah. Many of the presbyteries in central New York right now are like one of those little puzzles where all the pieces are moving around, you know. So,
right. Yeah.
So
it's one of many, because I've reached out to a lot of presbyteries, and, you know, there's a couple up in like South Dakota, North Dakota that have shrunk so much that they're looking at trying to kind of combining. You know, having a stated clerk, you know, even the staffing's becoming kind of a new reality. So we're all kind of in this age of transition and trying to find the new norm. And how do we continue to be productive, yet also find a new way to validate what the structure should look like? I'm the same way. We used to have an office in DC. My predecessor shut it down because it got too expensive. So I telework from my house. Things are different than they were.
I had a colleague that's a United Methodist pastor, and she had a relationship with the Veterans Outreach Center. And she told me they were looking for someone to lead them in worship. They didn't want to show up at 10 a.m. on Sunday.
Right.
They wanted their own thing.
Right.
So they wanted somebody to do that for them.
And that gets back to staffing. And probably at one time there were more people available. What's nice about that is, yes, it does give them a protected environment. By the flip side, if they're in a congregation, it does give them a different community. But again, I like people to be where they're comfortable. And so, but again, that's another example of everybody's trying to vie for the same one person to do 5 different things. How do we find someone to support all of that?
Well, none of us are very busy, so maybe we can put it.
Well, it's like me. I cut back my hours last year to 3/4 times. I went through cancer, and then this interim popped up, and someone called me and say, "Can you help us out for a while?" And not thinking this through, I said yes. And so yeah, I understand that dynamic of trying to straddle and having to spend we're actually in 4 people as the interims, and so we each have a week. Of course, every time I have a week, something happens in my other job that I've got to go do something with. But it's also a new model. We just don't have a lot of people who can come in for interims anymore.
Yeah.
And that, I also get calls from EPs. Look, hey, you got any retired chaplains want to come to XYZ to take a halftime, quarter-time church? I used to have a lot more people. We don't anymore. But one of my associate directors, he has a halftime church because they can't afford a full-time pastor. And my other associate director has a full-time church, but her part is more communications. And so again, same mission. We're just trying to find the same pool of people to do more with less.
I'd really be interested in a conversation about being able to establish a chaplaincy to this Veterans Outreach Center.
Love to.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go to my appointment. Scott, tag, you're it. And as soon as you're done, just end the meeting and the meeting will end. So
Sure.
thank you, Dennis. Enjoy
Hey,
the
Mike,
meeting.
good
I look forward to more conversations with you.
That sounds good. Thank you. Scott, how you doing?
Good, good.
Good.
So what you were a captain in the military?
So my long military career is in 1983. I quit LSU and went in the Army for a couple of years. Quit my junior year, went back guard, and then I did National Guard, ROTC, went to seminary, went back on active duty in 97, and I progressed through the ranks from an 03 to an 06. So from captain to colonel. My last job was a director of training for the Army Chaplain School, so I was in charge of taking new chaplains and chaplain candidates, which is a great program, getting through our basic course, and then taking captains and getting through their course. And then I retired in 22 and have never moved to the mountains and been up here ever since.
So it was in the Army, you said, right?
Army, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Spent
colonel in the Army.
39 years in the Army.
Is that school still in Staten Island? Is that the one?
No, it's been at Fort Jackson. So I went to its last version at Fort Monmouth in 91. I think 93 they moved down to Fort Jackson. And at one point, all the military chaplain schools were at Jackson. They've now gone back. One Air Force went back to Montgomery, and the Navy went back to some place that had an ocean. They're over in Rhode Island. So that is still one of the Army's major training bases. So it's nice having the school there for, all the different things they have to do. But I enjoyed that. That was a fun job. I mean, I've done all the different unit jobs from battalion to division. I've been on staff. I've been Army Futures Command. I've been Iraq, Afghanistan. And so the key was along the way was how do I be a mentor as I move up? And that's the key I like about this job. I do a lot of mentoring. I do a lot of pastoral care. I got people out on ships. I got people in all kinds of places. And not that presbyteries can't do it, but in my case, I think in many cases we leave the presbytery and we go off on active duty. We're not seen for 30 years, even though I send a report in. I'm the one kind of maintaining the quarterly or the more contact. If there's a big issue, I can always call the presbytery, but it's kind of the fun part of the job. Paperwork, not so much, but that's just part of it.
So Dennis, I apologize for being late to the game.
Are you fine?
We really did have a roofer on the house and just anyway.
Had that before. Yeah.
So I guess I want to first thank you for your service. And if somebody else has already done that, then just ditto that because I know there's military in my family and I understand some of the sacrifices that they have made over the years. And so here's the question. So what brilliant ideas do you have about being able to provide the chaplains that are out in the field the resources they need? And the reason I ask that question is because I think it's very similar to the question that we have about yeah, how do we provide, part-time pastors, or, take retirees and try to do something, and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. What, in all your years of experience, what ideas do you have to solve those very similar problems?
I think first is just maintaining contact with them. I went from one presbytery that once I left active duty, didn't hear from ever again. I'm in a different presbytery where they have a validated committee, and once a year they meet with all their validated ministers. So I'm one of them. So if you're active duty chaplain, you're in whatever, you still have a meeting with them, and that I like that connection because it maintains some type of contact. There's a committee that actually, and you have a person that's assigned to you. And so
Okay.
I think that's the first thing is just maintaining contact, knowing that they're not going to come back for a presbytery meeting. I mean, I spent 6 years in Germany. I was at, now the names have all changed, but in the old days, Fort Hood, Fort Gordon, Fort Jackson, Fort Leavenworth, Iraq, Afghanistan. And so we're always moving. But I think just having someone from the presbytery say, hey, we're thinking about you, how you doing, makes a big, it, it makes a big difference. The flip side is I do have chaplains that once they get away from the presbytery, they're off running like they've never had a presbytery. And so you all connecting with them is also, hey, remember, we're still here and you still belong to us. And that's one of the misconceptions I've had to work with was, so I'm active duty now. So now I belong to you, right? I said, no, no, no. You still belong to the Cumberland, the PCUSA, Cumberland America, Korean Press Church Abroad, and you belong to Presbytery X, Presbytery Y. uh, don't lose that connection. And so I can't force them to reach out to you, but if you all reach out to them, it seems like you have a greater impact. So that's kind of two things. One is taking care of them personally, pastorally, taking care of families. The other is reminding them that they're not away from the presbytery building. I mean, yes, they're off serving elsewhere, but you are still a member in that presbytery. And so it's kind of twofold.
Thank you for that. Good suggestion. Yeah.
It's hard because, like I said, there's 150 of us amongst 4 denominations. The odds of having a chaplain in your presbytery is like slim to none.
Mhm.
If you do, that's a rarity. But when something comes up, I'm always a resource. If you've got someone who wants to go into one of those things, they need to come through me. So I had a couple of cases where a couple of VA chaplains who had their presbytery sign the form, and the VA looked at it and said, no, one almost got fired because they thought they were trying to do an end run. So I had to kind of call and take care of the issue. They're looking for, so you missed part was that. So I represent the VA, Federal Bureau of Prison, and the military, and those organizations don't have time to look at every single subdivision of any denomination. So diocese, presbytery, home church, independent church. So there's one name against every denomination or faith tradition. So Islamic, Jewish, Catholic, all the different Protestants. In some cases, they're clusters. So in my case, I represent 4. And so when Pastor X, so Bonnie, wants to go into the VA, they're going to have my name on a list somewhere. If that form comes through, that needs to have my signature. The flip side is I do some screening. And so I had somebody applying for the VA recently and they had no CPE. I said, well, the VA requires 4 units. So I'm kind of a screener. So before we start the process or before they get into the cycle, on the military side, I had a couple had some medical issues. They were, you're not gonna make it. So I kind of helped them sort through. Yes, there are waivers, but there's a couple things that are not waiverable. Age requirements, there are certain things. The Federal Bureau of Prison has a minimum and maximum age. The military and the Guard Reserve has some flexibility, but my goal is to kind of screen some of that, and then also make sure they understand what they're stepping into, and then also make sure that their families understand it, and for Guard and Reserve that they've talked to their church. Be amazed the number of people applying for the Guard and Reserve have not talked to their congregation about doing this. And so I've had to head off some issues like you need to go back and talk to your session because if you've not talked with them, this may come back to bite you if you're not careful. I've made phone calls with personnel committees on churches to talk about the dynamics of being Guard, Reserve, time requirements, and the benefits. And so in one church's case, they hadn't given the guy a pay raise in 4 years. I said, well, if you'll invest in some time, something he wants to really do or she wants to really do, this is the benefit they will get. And a lot of times, some of the training we get on the military side benefits congregations. A lot of the counseling training, a lot of the staff training, we become better administrators, better staff people, better planning, looking 5, 10 years out. So there's kind of there's some things that benefit both sides. So that's, I also could run interference on that and just educate people.
Well,
Why don't all of them require CPE?
It's not feasible. Now, I did CP when I was in seminary, and some seminaries are requiring that now, and some presbyteries are. But not every denomination does. And so the problem is getting a unit. I was kind of surprised Federal Bureau of Prison doesn't require that. And so what the active duty requires is at least 2 years in a congregation. Air Force, if you're part-time, 4 years. If you have CP on top of it, I will, for my own, I do require at least 2 years in a ministry setting, preferably a church. However, if you do a year of CP, I'll count that as one of your years because I think it's a cutting edge, very open tool to understand yourself better. Also, it's real world. So pastoral care class I had in the seminary did not prepare me for being a CPE and a part-time chaplain at a hospital in Austin, Texas. I learned that by getting in there in the rooms and in the ER and all kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
so there's been a push to try to require that. With discovering is not every place can do that, and not every chaplain, because nowadays with like online degree programs, there's not a CP program near them. Now they have started some online CP programs. I got a couple of guys who are kind of working in that arena, and so I like to have CP, but I don't mandate it because I understand not everybody can do it. But if you can get it, it makes you a better candidate. I think it makes you a better pastor and a better leader.
I have 8 units of CPE, 15 years as a hospice chaplain, and it is a very different kind of ministry
It
than
is.
a congregation.
My wife was on call in Austin one night. She said, "Hey, come in. We got a tiger bite." She said, "What?" Yeah, a guy was playing with his pet tiger and it bit him. And she's like, "There's no seminary class prepared me for that." But what that taught you was that every crisis is not going to be cut and paste. Even the way people grieve. I was on call one night and there was a Hispanic, African American, and Caucasian family had 3 deaths at the same time. And as I went from family to family, each one had a different dynamic. That was never really covered in my one pastoral care class in Austin, but I learned that by having to engage people. And so any experience like that. I've got a residency right now. I work with a church in Arkansas. I can't find anybody to fill it, but it'd be a part-time in a small church and 3/4 time in a bigger church under the supervision of a clergy couple. Because again, active duty requires 2 years. And not all churches want to take a person for 2 years knowing they're going to leave. So we're trying to work some programs for those who want to go that direction. What's nice about that is they really get to cut their teeth with real people in real situations and not just academically. And yes, I can parse Greek and Hebrew. And yes, I know Calvin and Bart. Did not prepare me for the lady who picked a fight before a funeral because I wasn't wearing the proper stole that she had hand knitted. Things of that nature are just, So I agree with you. CPE, any volunteer experience. A lot of the seminary students I work with, I say volunteer everywhere you can. Food kitchens, food pantries, small churches, volunteer organizations, anything that gets that experience, not only from the pastoral side, but also the organizational side and the leadership side. So, because you're going to need all of that. I think seminaries have changed, but we had none of that when I graduated in 92. There wasn't a leadership class. There wasn't an admin class. It was all academic. And it was a little bit of a culture shock to go into a church the first time. And I was fortunate to have a year internship before I took a church to learn those things.
Well, it looks like our half hour has come upon us.
Okay. Yeah.
Not that I want to cut off any of this great discussion, if you will, but I would very much appreciate you taking the time, Dennis. And it's been, as Larry said, we are looking forward to figuring out how we can, help connect and, with the local, well, either with you or with the local veterans group and all that. And as you alluded to earlier, Mary, being up from north here in northern New York and us being kind of in the middle Mohawk Valley, are looking to do more cooperative things going forward. So anything that helps us all together, be able to work together on that, as sharing resources and such, we're definitely looking forward to that. So we'll definitely keep you on our Rolodex here.
Okay.
And I know Larry will be reaching out, again, as he was saying, to follow up on some of this. So
He's got my contact information. Call me, email me anytime. I don't have to go through him. I'm happy to answer questions. I don't always have the answer, but we'll try to find a person who can. I've got some good chaplains doing some great work in a variety of capacities. And some are church pastors and reservists, and some are church pastors, part-time VA. The veteran issue, it's like homeless issue and food insecurity issues. We got to find the resources and link them together. Many cases, we're all kind of rowing the same direction, but we're all in separate boats. Much stronger if we get on the same boat and try to pull together. And then, Scott, you've got a background, and Mary's got a background. There's skill sets you guys got that I don't have, but a team is so much stronger when we come together. So happy to help. Reach out to me anytime.
I appreciate that an awful lot. Before, I don't want to cut anyone else off, but anyone else have any last?
Just Scott, just a real quick comment, and I'll say this. I wish I knew about this when my dad, he was World War II and Korean. That I wish I knew some of this when I was taking him to the VA hospital.
Yeah.
And I've only been on this call a little tidbit, but boy, am I thinking, wow, if I had just known a little bit more.
Yeah. Every hospital's got a chaplain, and some have CP programs, and they're there not just to help the veteran, but to help you as a family member, because
Yes.
it is hard. And
Mhm.
when I was a parish pastor, a good friend of ours, dad was a bomber pilot during World War II. He never spoke a word of it until about the year or two before he died. And our
Yep.
friend was just amazed at what had been residing inside of his head all those years. It
Mhm.
explained a lot of the behavioral patterns. So when you look at the VA, there are some family programs for caregivers and stuff that, they do. It's a little more holistic. On the military side, every chaplain's there for everybody, regardless of faith background. Yes, I am a PCUSA pastor, but my units had 4 to 1,200 to 26,000 soldiers and families of every degree of religion, no religion, atheist, anti. But it was amazing how they would still come to me to talk about issues.
Yeah.
And so one of your resources could be looking at, I know even the VA hospitals have got satellite clinics, and a lot of times they have chaplains that go through there. And so, Bonnie, we could always talk sometime too if you want, because you're one of a number of cases over the years. And my wife's, I've got things I haven't told my wife, that she found out about one thing because they published it in a newsletter when I was in Iraq. And it's like we were trying to hide all this stuff. And so it's hard on families. And there is a process that families go through when someone goes away and then comes back, maybe the same, maybe different. But there's a lot of good programs out there. And I think, again, veteran service officers, and at least in my county, VA hospitals. I don't know much about the VFW and American Legion. I'm not a member of one of those things, but some of those have options, but I don't think they're as robust as probably your county veteran services officer in a VA clinic.
Before I let you go, well, are you guys connected? Like in New York State, we do have a 211, for services, that you can call like 911, but for other services. And then they try to connect up with them, and there's an group of organizations that they'll route you to,
Right.
if you will. Are you connected to any of those kinds of things, or is that something that doesn't quite make sense for the way you guys work?
So on the military side, we are assigned to units. And so like on the Army, every battalion on the way up has a unit chaplain, and their sole purpose is taking care of that unit and their families.
Okay.
There are some community chaplains that are for like the base installations that, the ships have one on every chaplain, every ship, the VAs and the hospitals. Some of my VA chaplains do some community work. I know a couple of my hospital chaplains are doing, they're assigned to community outreach. And so their goal is to help veterans programs, especially those that are farther away from, say, my VA is 40 minutes away, but you get South Dakota, North Dakota, Idaho, you can be too far away. They are opening satellite clinics. So it's like the 201 is mostly community resources. It would not probably involve my people because they're unit based or in the prison. However, if there's an issue, like say Scott calls 211 and says, my son's in the Army and he's got this issue, hopefully they will then try to figure out where your son is or your daughter is and route you back to that unit.
Yeah.
So what's nice about that is I think that's a good multi-level approach. However,
Right.
it's not always synchronized. And the part of the problem is a lot of those resources stay local, and so the same person's there. I moved every 2 to 3 years, pinging all over the world. But what I tell my new chaplains is that, especially those in seminary, you may be a battalion chaplain in the Army. Your VA chaplains are at the other end when you retire. And so that's kind of like the continuity of life. And then
Mhm.
meanwhile, the local churches are doing stuff, the veteran service officers doing stuff, the VFW is doing stuff. And so sometimes they're better connected and some places are not, but they're all trying to help. So at least
Sure.
that phone number does try to have some collection of resources. But no, would not always tie my to the chaplains that are serving in respective areas.
Yeah, just curious because we really only rolled that out here, at least in central New York. I'll say aggressively, like in the past 5 years.
Okay.
So, and yeah, and obviously trying to get the word out to people on that score
Right.
in general, not just obviously for veterans, but just in general and such. So that's kind of what I was.
What's important about that is that on the active duty side, you're assigned to a unit. So when I went to Iraq, myself and 30,000 of my best friends all picked up from Fort Hood and went to Iraq, and we all came home. Guard and Reserve has more issues because they can come from all over the state or multiple states. They're combined, and then they go off and do a mission. When they come back, they all blast back out to where they came from. Well, in many cases, there's not a chaplain, because they came from different states, different units. And that gets back to churches and softball groups and wherever they are connected, trying to identify when someone's in trouble. We at least have eyes on that side. We don't on the other. And of course, once you retire, you're kind of out on your own. And so
Yeah.
I like the 2-on-1. I like the congregational thing, but also we need to expand visibility to all kinds of other areas.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you for your time and
Yeah,
everyone
good to
else
see
for
you guys.
participating. And we'll
Give me a
talk to you
call or
later.
email if you need anything.
Well, absolutely do. Thank you.
All right. Y'all
Bye,
take care.
everyone.
Right.